The Toyota RAV4 has been the top dog of the compact crossover segment since the 1990s, and for good reason. RAV4s have been reliable, dependable, and serviceable, and the current generation is by far the best option on the market in that regard. However, as good as it is, the Toyota RAV4 isn't without its issues, and as the years went by, these became more and more prominent to buyers. Today we've coupled the most important of these, so sit tight as we take a look at 6 reasons why you shouldn't buy a Toyota RAV4. Number 6. Harsh ride. The Toyota RAV4 might be a serviceable and incredibly dependable vehicle, but it definitely isn't enjoyable. This is especially true when talking about suspension, as the RAV4 suspension setup is probably the harshest in its segment. First of all, the vehicle is very stiff when going over bumps and imperfections, which easily makes it one of the least enjoyable things to drive around towns and cities, especially if you live in a pothole-ridden metro area such as Philadelphia. However, the stiffness we could ignore. Most cars nowadays are stiffer, and with the roads getting better and better, this makes sense. However, what we can overlook is the absolute lack of refinement when going over said bumps. The suspension is very noisy, and it's like Toyota didn't even try to dampen out the noise, which further exacerbates the issue. Honestly, we're absolutely shocked by the sheer incompetence of the suspension, as the RAV4 has a multi-link rear axle, which is pretty sophisticated and should have been quite a bit more impressive in terms of comfort than it was. Number 5. Engine choice is limited. What's more disappointing than the suspension is Toyota's choice of engines, or to be more precise, lack thereof. The Toyota RAV4 comes with one engine, and that's the 2.5-liter inline-4 engine. Now, don't get us wrong, this is a perfectly adequate power plant, but nothing more than that. The engine produces around 203 horsepower and some odd 185 pound-feet of torque, which might sound okay. However, you have to remember that this is a 3,500 pound heavy car. This means that you'll get a 0 to 60 time of over 8 seconds, which is pretty bad. Even worse, the engine's relatively low torque output means that it'll be very gruff when overtaking, as it'll tend to over-rev itself and bleed your ears dry with protests of you doing so. In addition to that, the 8-speed automatic transmission is also very underwhelming, as it is generally very indecisive, especially when a downshift is needed. For example, overtaking. Finally, all-wheel drive isn't standard, so you'll have to cough up a couple more grand to get it. That said, the Toyota RAV4 Hybrid, which is the vehicle you should be going for, utilizes the same engine. However, it is slightly detuned, and it is helped by an electric motor, which combined produce 220 horsepower. The Hybrid is generally quite a bit more frugal than the regular version and comes with all-wheel drive as standard, all while being a second quicker from 0 to 60 compared to the regular RAV4. The Prime, or as it's now called, the PHEV, is even better, producing around 302 horsepower and offering a 0 to 60 time that is a lick under 5.5 seconds, which is pretty good. However, it costs a pretty penny too, and we'd honestly keep it simple when buying a RAV4. That said, we have to give credit to the RAV4's 2.5 in terms of reliability. There isn't an engine in this segment that can rival it, and albeit reliability doesn't play that big of a part these days anymore, seeing how we're all just driving cars until the warranty is out and then selling them, we're still pretty glad to see a manufacturer that still puts reliability at the top of the priority list. Number 4. Disappointing driving dynamics. What also needs a buff are the driving dynamics to the RAV4, because it is a relatively stiff vehicle, and because it has a relatively complex suspension setup, one wouldn't be at fault for thinking that the RAV4 is an entertaining car to drive. However, you would be absolutely wrong for thinking so, as the RAV4 is as boring as any other generic hatchback or hatchback-based SUV out there. The suspension is fine. It compensates for all the body roll adequately. However, it is no match for the likes of the Volkswagen Tiguan, and especially not the CX-5 and CX-50. The steering, though, it's terrible. It's just dead with no feeling whatsoever. The steering wheel feels very light to the point that the input feels artificial, and there's absolutely no communication with the front wheels. In addition to that, the fact that all-wheel drive isn't standard also doesn't help its case, and the RAV4 tends to understeer quite a bit when driven a bit more aggressively due to its heavy nose. That said, the hybrid has a bit better weight distribution and is more stable. However, it's also heavier and, in a sense, just as boring to drive. Number 3. Aging technology. The RAV4 was quite impressive when it came out in terms of tech. However, it has been more than 6 years since the current generation RAV4 has been revealed, and it shows. It really shows. First of all, the infotainment screens show its age through both the UI and the design, as this stuck-on-top design feels much more like the mid-2010s and mid-2020s. Just compare it to something like the Hyundai Tucson and you'll understand what we mean. In addition to that, the digital gauge cluster is also quite dated, as it offers very little customization and doesn't offer a navigation view, nor is it terribly informative. It's better on the hybrid because it has more utility, however, it's not that great. Apart from that, interior ergonomics, although better than most competition, still isn't on the level of the Mazda CX-5 or CX-50, which have a higher score because of the swivel-operated infotainment screen and more tactile buttons and dials. Apart from that, other stuff like a high-resolution reversing camera, better, more modern headlights, and a more modern design on the inside all lead us to feel quite a bit better about the way the RAV4 carries itself. It's an old lady. A good one, but still pretty old. Number 2. Competition got better. Here lies the biggest issue of the RAV4. It simply isn't on the level of its competition anymore. Every one of its competitors does specific things better, which makes it much more alluring to all kinds of audiences. For example, the Hyundai Tucson represents quite a bit better value for money than the RAV4, as it's cheaper, has a better powertrain choice, is much more modern, and is quite a bit nicer looking and feeling interior. The Subaru Forester, on the other hand, offers better on-road driving dynamics due to its much lower center of gravity courtesy of its Boxer engine. However, as much as it is good on-road, it absolutely annihilates the RAV4 off-road, where its standard symmetrical all-wheel drive system just eats through all kinds of rough and tough terrain. The thing is, the RAV4 has been designed as a jack-of-all-trades vehicle. However, in this regard, it gets outshined by the Mazda CX-5 and CX-50. The CX-5 offers better comfort levels, a higher quality interior, and is generally much more premium. The CX-50 is even better built and a fair bit sportier than the RAV4 while being similarly comfortable to it. However, this isn't even the biggest reason not to buy a RAV4. Number 1. The new generation is just around the corner. It's been 6 years since this generation of the RAV4 has been introduced to the public, and it's time for a replacement. Toyota has been very tediously focused on giving us a new RAV4 every 5 to 6 years, and this will continue the tradition for the future. In fact, with the 2025 model year, the current generation RAV4 is undoubtedly the longest produced RAV4 ever, which is really weird as the introduction of this generation did feel like it was recent. The upcoming generation of the RAV4 will fix most of these problems, as if we're to go by Toyota's recent ethics, it'll most likely be a more tech-oriented vehicle that'll also focus quite a bit on being relatively premium. The new CHR, which the US unfortunately didn't get, is much sleeker and far better built than the previous generation, to the point that it's actually borderline premium. The same is true for the Toyota Prius, which for the first time ever looks and feels great. It isn't a remarkable drive, but it is a much bigger improvement through and through. As a result, we expect that the RAV4 will go through the same redesign philosophy, and we're certain that the upcoming model will once again be the top dog of the segment. However, with all this in mind, we wouldn't write off the outgoing RAV4 generation just yet. In its hybrid form, it's still one of the best all-rounders, and the fact that it is the most reliable vehicle in its segment should definitely be a thing to remember when buying it. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.